please answer for me if the number of FOI requests has gone down since the fee came into effect, and a simple yes or no would be great.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the members. So, so this change was implemented 4 or 5 months ago. So it's very early to tell what the actual trend is going to be, because we're seeing some months going down, some months going up. In fact, overall. So we'll have to wait for the end of the year to see that full trend. But for example, in December 2020, there was 379. Requests. In December 2021, there was 374, so that's a decrease of 5. But in January 2020, there was 436, and January 2021, it went up to 484, so an increase of 48. So we're seeing a mixed bag, and we're going to have to wait to see the mixed bag, and I know the member and I are going to have a really deep discussion about this at next year's estimates once that full year has gone by and we can actually see those trend numbers.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate the minister's answer. And I believe that the minister is absolutely right that next year we'll probably have a more in-depth once we have better data. Chair, through to the minister. In the minister's mandate letter, it states, and I'm going to quote part of it: improve access to information rules to provide greater public accountability. And that's the end of the quote of the mandate letter. So I guess the question that begs being answered is, how does adding a fee to non-personal information improve access and provide greater public accountability?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So that mandate commitment is met through a number of ways. So the question was asked in about one very specific focus, but the completion of that mandate direction is achieved through a number of ways. And so how we've achieved that is by maintaining a high on-time compliance rate despite high volumes of requests increasing more than 40% over the past, over a 2-year period, which reached an all-time high of over 13,000 requests in 2019-2020. We modernized our system, our FOI system, to improve how the province receives and manages FOI requests. So we began a multi-year project to improve and modernize Freedom of Information services. So that's focusing on timeliness, reducing processing times, making access to information services easier for citizens, improving improvements to date are estimated to save about 400 hours annually. We've made sure that more government information is available to the public by default without the need of a Freedom of Information request. So we've enhanced access to our information through proactive releases by increasing it. 6 more types of government records are now available to people. That's a 75% increase. There were 8 available before. We've added 6 more to people to access this information without a Freedom of Information request. Now that results, and I think this is a great number for the member and everyone to know. So that results in over 5,000 information releases per year that no longer result or require an FOI request. We made amendments into the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act in November 21 that included a suite of measures to improve government transparency and accountability, including ministerial power to add subsidiary entities as new public bodies, implementing mandatory privacy breach reporting to require notification of the affected person and the Office of the Privacy and Information Commissioner. We added a requirement for public bodies, privacy management programs, added a new offense for willfully evading FOI, increased public bodies' ability to disclose Indigenous information with Indigenous governing entities, and added a requirement for public bodies to seek consent from Indigenous governing entities to disclose information that is culturally sensitive through FOI. So as you can see, Chair, through you to the member, there's a culmination of work that results in that commitment being met.
Member.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I do appreciate the answer from the minister. Madam Chair, through to the minister, as we know, there is now a committee with regards to FOI that's been formed. In my personal opinion, it's kind of like putting the cart in front of the horse, but it is where we are. And that committee is now going through and it's going to come up with recommendations to help improve transparency, among other considerations that committee will do. Does the minister plan on implementing the recommendations, even if one of those recommendations ends up being to scrap the fee?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm not going to prejudge any committee determinations. I'm looking forward to seeing their report, and of course we will give them thoughtful consideration as we would any committee report that we receive here in government.
Member.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I guess part of me is a bit concerned with that answer. And I guess why I'm concerned is that the committee will come up with recommendations, and the committee, I'm sure, has thoughtful deliberations and would, with regards to those, are there any recommendations that the minister can think of? And in particular, I want to stick with scrapping the fee as a prime example. If that was to be a recommendation, would the minister discount that particular one? And is there let's just start with that one. Would she consider ignoring the recommendation of the committee on that particular issue?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So the member is asking hypothetical questions, which is, absolutely the member's right, of course. But it's hard to comment on hypothetical. I am looking forward to seeing the committee's report. I know they will put thoughtful deliberation in it, and as always when receiving committee reports, we will take that committee report and give it careful consideration.
Member.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I do thank the minister for the answer, and I'm pretty sure I could keep asking it in numerous different ways, but I'm not going to actually get an answer to that particular question. I can respect that. What I will ask is, through you to the minister, in the minister's opinion, has adding a fee increased the response rate for FOI requests? Has it made it faster?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So it is a similar answer to earlier when the member and I are having this thoughtful conversation here. It is early days in this process. That the change was just 4 months ago there, and so it is still too early to establish that trend. But I know this is going to be a very big conversation next year when we've been able to establish that trend and really dive deep into what the results of that are. And that's just one aspect of it. As we also talked about before through you, Chair, with the member, that our modernization work is just beginning. So there's a number of other pieces to ensuring that we have timely releases or timely responses going out, and that modernization work that we're doing is going to be critical to that as well. And so we need to focus on that as well in this conversation. And I know it's going to be a great debate, but really But really, the member and I both know that the fastest way to get information is through proactive releases and not even to have to ask for it. And so we've already increased 6 categories and types of proactive releases. That's something I'm looking to continue increasing, because that's how I believe the system should work, being able to find these categories of information that we can just proactively release to the public, so that it doesn't even have to be asked for.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and to the Minister. That's something that you and I wholeheartedly agree on, actually. If you were to go ask the standard public what's an FOI, they'd probably look at us with a blank stare. It's very few individuals that understand what an FOI, I think, really is. What's an FOI request and how would one go about doing it? What that does beg the question, though, is the ministry tracking what was once asked as an FOI versus what's now being proactively disclosed? Are they tracking, or is there an intent to track, and if there isn't, I'd highly suggest there is, the types of FOIs that were requested in the past that now, hey, you know what, you don't even have to ask for this because it's proactively disclosed. Are we monitoring that?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I'm understanding the member's question, and I think this is the best answer for it. So we are always actively tracking the types of requests that are made and looking for those trends, which is how we come up with those proactive release categories. And so, for example, the latest one was summary of briefing notes. And so, that's something that was continually being asked for. And so we had the ability to take a look at that, see that pattern, and say, well, this is something we can proactively release and should just be available to the public. And so, yes, I thank the member for the suggestion. That's work the ministry does, and it's great work, which is how we were able to increase an additional 6 categories.
Member.
Thank you very much, Chair, and again, I appreciate the minister's answer to the question. And I guess I would hope, I'll make a statement here, I would hope that what happens in the future is if this, part of the reason that the minister used to implement a $10 FOI fee was to help reduce the number of requests because staff was literally being drowned in FOI requests. And I guess the take home for me would be, and the take home for the public would be, is their information that they own. And if we proactively release it, that actually is probably the easiest way for the public to get the information that they really want. And I can see a future in the time where if the committee recommends scrapping the fee, which was highly contentious, and I'm going to go into an example in a minute where there's some often unforeseen consequences, thank you, whenever we implement something. We always try and solve one problem, we end up creating 3 more half the time, it seems to me. But I look forward to a time where we say, you know what, a fee is not required anymore because we've reduced the volume as such that we don't need, we've reduced the volume of requests. One of the unforeseen consequences, and I have a great fondness in my heart for students. And I have a copy of a response from a superintendent here to the Griffin's Nest Student Newspaper Club. And I'll summarize it. Basically, they have found that the $10 FOI has, it's a student newspaper. They don't have much of a budget. And the $10 FOI has actually been a roadblock for them. It's one of those unforeseen consequences that maybe we need to tweak it. And basically, at the end of the line, the superintendent said, I'm going to come by and do school-by-school visits. But yes, unfortunately, there is no way around this $10 FOI. I would hope that the minister took into account that that this was a hardship for First Nations, as an example. There are going to be other groups and that it's going to be a hard group for. Would the minister consider including student newspapers in the exemption of the $10 FOI fee?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank the member for highlighting this particular case in the House. It was one that I am aware of, and I think it's important. As with any new piece of legislation, it's important to try and strike that balance within it. And of course, as with any new piece of legislation, it's also important to monitor the implementation and what that looks like, and to hear feedback. And so I thank the member for raising it in this House, and it's pieces that we are monitoring.
Member.
Thank you very much, Chair, and in all due respect to the Minister, that didn't really answer my question. The question was, and I appreciate that, and I know that the Minister has a soft spot for students. We all do. You know, this is a time where we want to encourage those minds to be critical thinkers. We want to encourage those minds to question and demand better. And quite frankly, when I was the mayor, some of the best questions I ever got were from elementary students, right? Some of the funniest as well. But the minister, in all due respect to the Minister, through you, Chair, is this something that the Minister is considering waiving the FOI fee on, in particular, student newspapers?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the member. So it is early days in this piece of legislation, and I've committed to the member in the House here to monitoring all trends with the legislation.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and I have to say that while I understand the comment, I find it disheartening, as I'm sure there are many budding journalists as well that find that answer disheartening, because, you know, they just don't have the means. And I guess it begs the question, you know, why is it, for instance, one group, we know it created a financial hardship on First Nations and Indigenous groups, and I fully support the waiving of the fee for those groups, because it did provide an unnecessary burden. And I would say to the Minister that this is of equal importance, and one of the things we want to do is foster those young minds. Even though they may ask us questions that we find uncomfortable, that's not the point. The point is we want to ensure that it does not create a financial hardship so that they can't go on and do their learning and their education. But I'll let that go. You know, one of the biggest bones of contention with this legislation and other legislation that has come before that's come onto the floor has been the fact that that many of the questions I asked the Minister last time around were, the answer was, well, that will be yet to be determined in regulation. I can't really answer that because we haven't got the regulations yet. So I guess the next big question then is, when will the regulations for Bill 22 be announced?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So I think it's important to just take a pause here with this line of questioning, because we are in budget debate here, and this is now getting in a line of questioning that's on policy debate on a piece of legislation. And so I do want to correct the record on one thing. The waiving of fees for Indigenous governing entities was about government-to-government work. That's where that piece was put in. As for the member's question, we are getting into legislative policy debate. I was happy to answer the numbers about the trends on the FOI, as that is part of revenue within, you know, there is now a potential revenue stream to discuss there within this budget piece, but I'm unable to, in this budget debate, do the legislative piece.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I'm slightly troubled by the Minister's response. Part of the regulations would be budgetary in nature, and I think that is fully within the realm of questions to do that, because it will affect the overall budget. But be that as it may, has the Commissioner been briefed on those regulations that are being proposed, and does the Minister plan on proactively disclosing any comments or criticisms that the Commissioner may have?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So the regulation regarding the fee has already passed, and that's the only regulation that had a budgetary impact. If the member would like further information about policy within a certain bill, I'm more than happy to make my staff available to brief the member outside of this budgetary process.
Member.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the minister for that. I really do, and thank you. And I guess here's for me the tie-in to some of this. So, and what the tie-in for many British Columbians will be, and where their concerns will be. Does the minister agree that if no regulations are forthcoming, that there will be no protection for personal information disclosed outside of Canada? I think that supersedes any budgetary concern we may have. We're now talking about people, some of the most private and personal information that people have. Does the minister agree that if no regulations are forthcoming, that there will be no protections for personal information disclosed outside of Canada? I think British Columbians deserve an answer to that question.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So the regulations regarding disclosure of information outside of Canada and the protections there were passed on November 26th. But again, so I wanted to clarify that just so that impression was not left. But again, that any of this conversation is bill debate rather than budget debate. And I am happy to provide the member a copy of what was passed on November 26th.
Member.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I do thank the minister for the answer. And so, the tie-in to the budget is there may or may not be a cost savings to store information outside of British Columbia. So, is any British Columbian's personal information being stored outside of BC? Say, I hate to say it, but I will anyway, because it could be in Russia, for instance, if they're going to offer us a bargain. I'm sure that's not one of them. But you can understand British Columbians' hesitation. Now, there may be, the budgetary connection would be if there's a cost saving to somewhere else, and that was one of the reasons why that was brought in. Is there now any of British Columbia's personal information being stored outside of the province or outside of Canada?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair, and I want to thank the member for the question. And we took a lot of time here because we were trying to frame the member's question into a budget debate, which is what we're doing here, and we really struggled to do that because these aren't budget questions. These are policy questions based on a piece of legislation. What I can say, I was able to do a budget piece for the member. What I can say is in this budget debate that we're having here, the way the funding model works in citizen services is that we are paid for ministries to store data in our data center, Kamloops, for example, as the minister or as the member had mentioned. And we do that through our hosting contract. So there are no savings, because the member alluded to something like that. There are no savings within this ministry when ministries move to cloud-based services, and we have no line in our budget budget books to further this line of questioning in this House right now. Thank you.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through to the minister. So, there is a cost associated with storing this information. To say otherwise actually doesn't wash with me or many other British Columbians for that matter. And we had talked earlier about there was subjective and objective. And I would say that some of this is highly subjective. So we are now talking about some of the most intimate personal information that people have. We're talking about university records, ICBC records, healthcare records, and I'm not so sure that British Columbians or Canadians are going to be comfortable knowing that without the regulations in place, which the minister has said they're not, that they could be stored outside of British Columbia without their knowledge. And I guess what would make British Columbians feel better is, does the minister agree that there are risks to storing people's personal data albeit a soft, the only reason I can think of, and British Columbians could think of, is that this would be a cost-saving measure. But does the minister agree that storing people's sensitive personal data outside of the province or Canada could potentially make their information subject to viewable by that country's legislation? And I'll go back to when Homeland Security, for instance, had the right to file through anybody's personal data that was being stored within the United States. So could this, I guess, and the part to this is, could this constitute, pardon me as I get my words right, a breach of trust and of privacy of British Columbians that believe that the government of BC protects their data if it's all to do with saving money?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So again, to the member, the regulations were passed along with the protections on November 26th. I want to make sure that that's clarified in the record. Happy to make my staff available to the member to walk through that and explain that to the member. These are policy questions on a piece of regulation. This is a budget debate.
Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the last question, and I'll have before I pass it off to the official third party. Does the minister, through you to the minister, does a verbal sign-off capture the intent of duty to document?
Chair, so policy piece on the Information Management Act. Happy to walk the member through that act at a different date. Thank you.